The bar was quiet, the kind of quiet you only find on stations far from any shipping lane, where nobody comes unless they already know what they are looking for. I was 3 drinks in when the young one sat down across from me. He had that look, hungry, sure of himself. He put a data chip on the table and slid it toward me. "Contract," he said. "Good pay, short job. I need someone with real experience, and everyone says you're the best there is." I looked at the chip, but didn't touch it. "What's the target?" I asked. "A supply depot, guarded by a Deathworlder Special Forces unit. Small team, maybe a dozen of them. We'll have 80 guns. It's practically a training exercise." I laughed. I didn't mean to. It just came out of me, low and humorless, and the young one's face went stiff. "You think that's funny?" "I think you don't know what you're asking," I said. "Sit down. Order something. I'll tell you why I won't take that contract, and then you can decide for yourself if you still want to go." He sat. He ordered nothing. He just watched me, arms crossed, waiting for an old merc to talk himself into looking weak. I didn't blame him. I would have done the same thing, 20 years ago. Here is the truth about me. I have fought in 11 campaigns across 6 sectors. I have taken contracts against pirates, against rebel militias, against 3 different hive species that don't feel pain the way we do. I have buried friends and made enemies, and walked away from more battlefields than I can count. I am not a coward. I want that understood before I say another word. But there was one job, one single contract, years ago, that changed how I think about every fight I take now, and it is the reason I will never again raise a weapon against a Deathworlder wearing that black and gray uniform. We were a company of 86. Mixed species, mixed weapons, all professionals. The client wanted a research outpost taken quietly, its data extracted, its staff removed. Standard work. We were told the site was guarded by 12 humans, Special Forces designation, stationed there for security. 12, against 86. The math looked easy. I remember laughing about it in the briefing room, the same way you're laughing at me right now in your head. Our approach was clean. We came in through the tree line at night, moving in 3 groups, covering each other the way we'd trained 100 times. I was leading the second group. We had thermal countermeasures, silenced weapons, every advantage a good employer's credits could buy. The first sign that something was wrong came when Group 1 reported movement, where there shouldn't have been any. Not human movement, wildlife, they said. Big animals, moving through the dark like they owned it. I remember thinking, that's strange. We scouted this location for weeks and never logged large predators in this sector. But we kept moving. We were close to the perimeter fence. That's when the first flare went up. Not from us. In half a second, the night turned to day, and I understood 2 things at once. First, they knew we were coming. Second, they had known for a long time. What followed was not a firefight. A firefight is chaos, both sides scrambling for cover, shouting orders, hoping the other side breaks first. This was something else. This was 12 people moving through 86 of us, like water finding cracks in a wall. I want to describe what I saw honestly, because exaggeration would do you no favors. I did not see monsters. I saw humans. Ordinary-looking, tired-looking humans, in dark uniforms, breathing hard, sweating, bleeding when they were hit. They were not invincible. Our weapons worked. I watched 2 of them go down in the first minute, hit clean, and for one heartbeat I thought, good, this will be over fast. Then I watched their teammates drag them back without breaking stride, without panic, moving like they had rehearsed this exact moment 1,000 times. One of the wounded ones, blood soaking through his uniform at the shoulder, still had his weapon up, still firing controlled bursts as his squad mate hauled him toward cover. He was hurt. He should have been finished. He kept fighting anyway, calm, like his body was simply an inconvenience he'd decided to ignore for a few more minutes. That was the first thing that put a cold feeling in my chest. It wasn't that they could take damage. Plenty of species can take damage. It was that damage didn't seem to change their decision-making at all. No panic, no hesitation, just a brief adjustment, like stepping around a puddle, and then back to the plan. Group 1's line broke within 4 minutes. Not because they were all hit. Most of them weren't. They broke because the humans had turned our own formation against us, using the terrain we'd chosen, funneling us into crossfire lanes we hadn't noticed, because we'd been so focused on reaching the fence. I heard our company commander screaming for a fallback, and I heard, over the general comm channel, one human voice, flat and unbothered, giving coordinates to his own team like he was reading a shopping list. My group reached the eastern wall. I remember pressing my back against the cold metal, chest heaving, and looking at the 4 mercs left standing beside me, out of the 11 I'd started the night with. One of them, a big armored fighter who had never once shown fear in the 2 years I'd known him, looked at me and said, "They're not trying to win. They're trying to teach us something." I didn't understand what he meant. Not yet. We pushed forward, because the contract demanded it, and because retreating through that kill zone seemed just as dangerous as advancing. We found 2 of the humans holding a choke point between 2 storage buildings. Just 2, against the 11 of us still capable of fighting. I thought finally, numbers will matter here. I was wrong again. They didn't hold the position like people desperate to survive. They held it like people executing a plan that already accounted for exactly this moment. One of them called out ranges to the other without even looking, trusting his teammate completely, the way you trust your own hand. They moved in a rhythm, cover and reload, never both exposed at once, and every shot they took bought them another few seconds without costing them an inch of ground. We lost 3 more mercs at that choke point. I watched the light leave one of them, a person I'd shared meals with for 2 years, and I felt the kind of fear I hadn't felt since I was very young. Not fear of dying. I had made peace with that a long time ago, the way every merc eventually has to. This was different. This was the fear of understanding, mid-battle, that the outcome had never actually been in doubt, that we were not fighting an enemy, we were being processed. That is the word that came to me, crouched behind a supply crate with my ears ringing and my hands shaking for the first time in a decade. Processed, like we were a problem with a known solution, and they were simply working through the steps. At some point, the shooting stopped being the loudest thing in the compound. What I remember most clearly, more than the noise, is the quiet that came after. Our company commander called the retreat. Not because we'd lost, we'd known we'd lost for a while by then, but because there was almost nothing left to retreat with. Of 86 of us, I counted 19 still standing when the order came. 19, against 12 humans who had held every objective they were assigned to hold. Here is the part that still keeps me up some nights. They let us go. We expected them to finish it. 19 exhausted, broken mercs stumbling back through the tree line, and 12 Deathworlders who could have ended every one of us without much more effort than it had already cost them. But they didn't. I looked back once, near the edge of the clearing, and saw a handful of them standing at the fence line, weapons lowered, watching us leave. Not celebrating, not even particularly interested, like we had simply stopped being relevant to whatever they were doing next. One of them, the one nearest the fence, lifted a hand, not a threat. Almost, and I know how strange this sounds, almost respectful, as if to say, "That's enough for today, go home." That was more frightening than anything that had come before it. A desperate enemy will chase you down out of fear or fury. A calm one doesn't need to. They had already achieved everything they wanted from the encounter, and killing the survivors simply wasn't part of the plan. We were allowed to live, because living carried a lesson, and dying wouldn't have taught us anything at all. I lost 41 people that night. People I'd trained with, eaten with, trusted with my life more times than I could count. And the unit that did it walked away with what I later learned were only 2 serious injuries and 0 deaths of their own. 12 against 86, and the math I'd laughed about in the briefing room turned out to be exactly backward. I've thought about that night more times than I can count in the years since. I've talked to other mercs, other companies, people who took similar contracts against similar units, and the stories all rhyme, even when the details differ. Different planets, different objectives, different numbers on paper, but always the same shape underneath. Calm where there should have been panic. Coordination where there should have been chaos. Mercy that had nothing to do with weakness. Because mercy only means something when it comes from someone who could have chosen otherwise and chose not to. That's the thing nobody tells you about fighting a Deathworlder Special Forces unit. It isn't that they're stronger than you, though they usually are. It isn't that they don't feel fear or pain, because they clearly do. It's that they don't fight like people trying to survive the next 5 minutes. They fight like people who already know how the whole story ends, and they're simply walking you through it at their own pace. You can beat a desperate enemy. Desperation makes mistakes. Desperation panics, overextends, breaks formation when the pressure gets high enough. But you cannot rattle someone who was never desperate to begin with. You cannot outthink a plan that already priced in your best move. And you cannot frighten someone who has already decided, calmly, long before the first shot was fired, exactly what they are willing to lose to finish the job. I looked at the young merc sitting across from me, and I could see he hadn't fully believed a word of it. I could see the same look I must have worn 20 years ago, the certainty that experience is just a story old people tell to justify their fear. Maybe he was right not to believe me completely. Maybe he needed to see it himself before the lesson would ever really land. Most of us did. I pushed the data chip back across the table. Take the contract if you want, I said. 80 guns against a dozen humans still sounds easy on paper. It sounded easy to me too, once. Just remember, when the fee runs out and you're counting who's left standing, that no amount of credits ever covers what that fight actually costs. I promise you that much. He picked up the chip, turned it over once in his fingers, and didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he pocketed it, stood, and walked out without another word. I don't know if he took the job. I never learned his name, and I never asked. But I finished my drink alone, the way I finish most nights now, thinking about a fence line at the edge of a forest, and a hand raised in something that almost looked like respect, and 41 names I still carry with me every single day. That's why no mercenary who has actually faced them will ever willingly do it again. Not because we're cowards, because we've already seen how the story ends, and some lessons only need to be taught to you once.